never attains perfection in this life, nor does he attain happiness or liberation from the material condition. Yashastra vidhim utsrijya vartate kama karata nasa siddhim avapnoti na sukham na param gatim, which means, he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness, nor the supreme destination. Bhagavad Gita 16:23. Thus, one who is deliberately transgressing the rules and regulations of the Shastras is simply involving himself more and more in material existence in the three modes of material nature. Human society should therefore follow the Vedic principles of life, which is summarized in Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, life in material existence will continue. Foolish persons do not know that the soul is passing through 8,400,000 species of life. By the gradual process of evolution, when one comes to the human form of life, he is supposed to follow the rules and regulations laid down in the Vedas. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that the living entity since time immemorial is suffering the threefold miseries of material nature due to his demoniac attitude, which is his spirit of revolt against the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna also confirms this in Bhagavad Gita 15:7. Mamai vangso jivaloke jiva bhuta sanatana manashastan indriyani prakriti stani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Every living entity is part and parcel of God. There is no reason for the living entities being put into the miserable threefold condition of material existence, but that he voluntarily accepts material existence on the false pretext of becoming an enjoyer. This is a long purport. It is, well, 3.5, almost 4 pages. So let me just read a little bit more. To save him from this horrible condition, the Lord has given all the Vedic literatures in his incarnation of Vyasadeva. It is therefore said, Krishna Buli Se Jiva, Anadi Bahira Mukha, Ata Eva Maya Tare, Deya Samsara Dukkha. By forgetting Krishna, the living entity has become materialistic since time immemorial. Therefore, the illusory energy of Krishna is giving him different types of miseries in material existence. Chaitanya Charitamrita Majjhila, chapter 20, verse 117. Maya dukta jivera nahi swata Krishna jnana jivere kripaya kaila Krishna Veda Purana. When a living entity is enchanted by the external energy, he cannot revive his original Krishna consciousness independent. Due to such circumstances, Krishna has kindly given him the Vedic literatures, such as the 4 Vedas and 18 Puranas. It's Chaitanya Charitamrita Majjhila, chapter 20, verse 112. Every human being should therefore take advantage of the Vedic instructions. Otherwise, one will be bound by his whimsical activities and will be without any guide. Okay, let's say a few words briefly about this. Anyata karma purvano manarudo nabajate guna pravaha patito nashta pragyo vrajat yada. Otherwise, a person who acts whimsically falls down due to false prestige. Thus he becomes involved in the laws of nature, which are composed of the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance. In this way, a living entity becomes devoid of his real intelligence and becomes perpetually lost in the cycle of birth and death. Thus he goes up and down from a microbe in stool to a high position in the Brahmaloka planet. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Prachari Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastuchadeshtani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Brahmanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrimasti Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vachikalpatarubhyas Jayakripa Sindhu Vyavacha Paditana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. This is Sri Narada Muni instructing King Prachana Barhishat by telling him the story of King Karanjan. This is the beginning here. Prachana Barhishat was a pious king in many ways, but he was too materially attached. And as a result, his efforts in religion, spirituality, like that, he was very preoccupied with karmakandya, how to increase material enjoyment. This was his idea. When it came to anything to do with spiritual life or religious life. And in this way, his situation was very bad. And after some time, he would have fallen down. Currently, he was a king and he had all the facility at his disposal, but in due course it would have been lost. As Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport, people are going up and down. There is no static position in material existence. There's constant fluctuation. And therefore Srila Prabhupada says, from the microbe in stool up to some high position in Brahmaloka. So sometimes we talk about the worm in stool, and everyone thinks, oh, worm in stool, that's very bad. This is worse. This is a microbe in stool. Oh, that's extreme. There are 8,400,000 species of life. In Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma, he doesn't really say it exactly, precisely in as many words, but he infers that the lowest species may be the Indragopa germ. Indragopa germ indicates that it's like a microorganism, it's a microbe. It may be the 8,400,000 species. Out of 8,400,000, it may be the last. So anyway, there is a last. Then of course at the other end there is Lord Brahma. And the understanding which is presented to us is, generally, that we have all been in all those species of life. Sounds fantastic. It is fantastic. But at least this is how it's certainly presented on a number of occasions in different places. And it's probably like that. You know, sometimes when people are invited to do something but they've done it so much and they're tired of it. Or they're invited to go somewhere, but they've been there so much, they're tired of it. Sometimes there's a saying, been there, done that. Like, in my own case, sometimes devotees want to take me to the beach, and it can be pleasant. But I lived on a beach. I was born on a beach. I've done beaching. I've done it. It's okay. It's okay. Thank you. Been there. Done that. Just, you don't need it any longer. So the living entity has been there and done that in all 8,400,000 species of life, and in many cases in different variations of the different species. The living entity has tried very hard to enjoy separately from Krishna. If nothing else, we should perhaps get some type of award for having tried hard. Sometimes they do that at school or in some competition, something. The winners, of course, get the prize, but someone else gets a prize for really trying, despite difficulties like that. So in one sense, this is our situation. We've been there, we've done it, we tried, and tried, and tried, and failed, and failed, and failed, to find real satisfaction, real happiness, real pleasure. We failed. Every time we failed. But it is an interesting phenomenon that despite having failed in so many ways in the past, we still keep trying. Albert Einstein, famous mathematician, scientist type, he gave apparently a definition of insanity. You know what that is? You heard? He said insanity means that you think that if I do the same things that I've done, just the same things, I may get a different result. It seems very simple. It may seem over simple, but actually it's very interesting analysis. Insanity means you seriously think, if I just do the same things, I may get a different result. So he says this is insanity, and if we think about it, we'll see there is some truth in it. And in fact, this is what is going on in material existence. We all tried eating. In many different ways we tried eating. It didn't really satisfy us. Mating in all different species and ways, and it didn't satisfy us. Sleeping. We tried our best to sleep enthusiastically. Wake up in the morning, no, I'm going to sleep more. Some people sleep till midday or something like that. Well, it'd be interesting to see what's the world record for sleeping. The longest time a human being slept. But anyway, the thing is, people think that they're going to get pleasure from these things like meaningful pleasure. Some pleasure may be there, but not substantial, satisfying, complete pleasure, which makes your life complete. Not like that. But still we try. And then again we try. And then again. And then we're born in this life. And in this life we try. In a Mauritian way. We will have, what do they call it? I don't know how to pronounce it. Sega, you call it Sega? Sega. Sega music.
Music.
We had orchestral music. We had pop music. You know, we had different types of music. They didn't make us happy. Let's try Sega. Maybe that'll make us happy. So the point is being made here by Narada Muni to King Prachinabargi Shat that people just foolishly live, just doing, just whimsically doing whatever they feel like doing. When I was young, I don't know if it's still current, when I was young, there was a slogan which was adopted at the later stages of the hippie era. That slogan was, if it feels good, do it. In other words, outright hedonism, simply sense gratification. If it feels good, do it. So here, though, the point is being made that we should live according to the Vedic injunctions because they're coming from a higher level. And they're helping us, they help us to live in such ways that we are happy while living here. We are happy. But then at the end, we can go back to Godhead and not have to take birth again in some situation, who knows what. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna makes the point, I think it's 522. Anyone know 522? I don't have a Bhagavad Gita with me, but the translation goes that an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, because such pleasures have a beginning and an end. Therefore, the wise person does not delight in them. So this is the perspective of Krishna consciousness, that through, on one hand, experience, through, on the other hand, hearing, the Krishna conscious knowledge, the Vedic knowledge. In these ways, the devotee sees, understands, and witnesses directly and experiences that actually these activities for material pleasure, not only do they not really satisfy me and leave me feeling just like incomplete or lacking, not only that, they actually create a lot of misery, a lot of distress. Just like, very good example, in a sort of macro sense, in a very broad sense, is that people going back 100 or 200 years or something of that sort, people were thinking how to increase our enjoyment. And of course they tried in different ways, but one way they tried, which is still going on, industrialization. Let us industrialize. Then everyone will get work, and therefore everyone will be able to live okay. You won't have like a peasant class who are just financially hopeless. You know, the lowest class will be working class. And through industrialization, we will produce many things for enjoyment. So like this, our enjoyment will increase because we're producing so many things. But people, their situation will be improved because they'll all be working, and there won't be any people who are just penniless. So they thought, let's do it, and they did it. And they're still doing it. Mauritius is a grand example. When I first came to Mauritius, there was no industrialization. There was very little. It was very different. But now, through industrialization, maybe not so much here yet, but through industrialization, we have created global warming. And this is a massive threat to humanity. And not just humanity, the whole planet. It's a massive threat. But, so this is material existence. And Krishna says, an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery. And we might think, when we hear that, we might think, of course, why would anyone take part in with something which is obviously miserable? Like, if someone gives you a hammer and tells you, just put your hand there and bash your hand with the hammer, then generally you won't do that because you know it's going to cause misery. So material existence on the whole, in general, it produces misery in different ways, in so many ways. But the problem is, there is a facade, a superficial, slight appearance of happiness over the misery. The misery is there, but it's underneath. And on the surface, it looks like happiness. And so people, therefore, whole of human society is geared towards increasing our sense gratification through different means to do with industrialization and just exploiting the material nature more and more. So, because there is this little veneer, you understand veneer? There's this little veneer of happiness over the real substance, the real body of the situation, which is suffering. But because there's a veneer, people think, very good. Actually, they're taking part in the sources of misery. But because there's a veneer of happiness, they think it's a process of enjoyment. And in this way, life in this world is becoming so chaotic. So chaotic, it's fantastic. It's just amazing. So Narada Muni is instructing, just beginning his instructions to King Prachinabarisha. And he's in the process just starting to tell him that you think religion means karma kandya, pray to the demigods, do some sacrifices, etc., and increase your material enjoyment. And in this way you think you're increasing your happiness. But actually you don't know how to increase your happiness. Actually what you're doing is increasing your suffering. He was very fond, Prachinabarisha was very fond of sacrificing animals to certain deities, whoever. And he thought, this will increase my happiness. Little did he know that by doing that, he was actually increasing his suffering. A little superficial happiness but then a lot of suffering. So Narada Muni is just beginning to try to convince him, and he succeeds, although it takes quite some time, a few chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam, to convince him that this is not the way to increase your happiness. Rather, it will bring distress. So better, just take shelter of Krishna, render devotional service to Krishna. Even though it may appear initially that it's not really giving you happiness, or that it may not give you happiness, but actually the fact is that if you persevere, then you find unlimited happiness come. Tremendous happiness come. Although Krishna is watching, and Krishna is testing, how much do they really want just immediate enjoyment? And how much do they really want just to please me? This is what Krishna is doing with the devotees. And when Krishna sees that actually this person is ready to put aside his or her enjoyments, material pleasures, in order to serve me and please me, when Krishna sees that, then he really gives mercy. And the devotee progresses nicely in devotional service. Otherwise, up, down, and then down, down. There are more downs available than there are ups. It is not just up and down, just equal up and down, and just, no. There are more downs than ups. Just consider 8,400,000 species of life. The top 400,000 are the human. And now we know by our own experience and through hearing of different things, we know that for human beings, life is difficult. Oh, you've got to work hard. And there are many problems. There are health problems, financial problems. Sometimes there are crime problems. And they're just different problems. And then at the end, you die and you lose everything anyway. So if it is so difficult in the top 400,000 species, the top 5%, 400,000 out of 8,400,000, approximately 5%. If it's so difficult there, imagine the other 8 million species. Please, not that, not that. It's inconceivable what they go through. So Narada Muni is trying to convince King Prachanabarhishat of this. And he does. And there's a very interesting description. The story of King Piranja, which follows on from this. And this is the way Narada gets the message across to King Prachanabarhishat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any comment or question? Correction? Words of wisdom?
A question, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah. While doing Harinam, when you're chanting the holy names, so if there are those living entities like plants and dogs, animals,
Right.
do they overlap certain stage of their life, the progress I mean?
Yes. Every living entity who hears the Harinam, they make great progress on the spot. And in so many cases, in their next lives, they'll take human births. Whereas normally they would not. that if they're exposed to the Harinam, then it's very likely that they'll at least get human births and possibly be born as devotees. And you know, like when food is offered to Krishna, the food is benefited. Just imagine there's some big kirtan, some big kirtan, everyone's dancing, and one ant is walking across the floor, and one devotee dances on top of the ant. The ant may go back to Godhead. In the middle of a kirtan, under the lotus foot of a devotee, sure, you can't really ask for more than that. Hare Krishna.
Guruji, can I ask another question?
Okay.
At the time when we were with Krishna, when we became envious of enjoying separate with him,
Yeah.
the desire that we had at that moment, had it already transformed into a material desire?
Well, when it came to that point that we became envious of Krishna, yes, it was already a material desire, or a materialistic attitude, anti-Krishna. It had already become perverted.
Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Gurudev ki
Jai.